Hey, Comic Clan, welcome to our coverage of Saga Volume 1 via Indie Comic Book Club. And I just wanted to get out in front of this and let you know we had some technical issues that are totally my fault. None of my audio came through during the whole recording, and it was so dumb. It was extremely annoying. Um, but we had such a good conversation that I couldn't ask Nitro and TolkienAsian to re-record the whole thing. It was an awesome conversation. Like, we want to do another one with our group of three at some point, and we had such a good time. And so what I've done is I've made some edits and made some cuts in which I cut out the long parts of basically dead silence, which would have been me speaking. And so what I'm going to do is at the end of this, I'm going to share my own thoughts on Saga in a much more abbreviated sense than I would have during the recording. So sit back and enjoy. And if you are watching this via Patreon, thank you for your support.
I'm a geek. I use my bubbles when I speak. I'm a freak because she's received that from me. I'm unique. There is only one of me. I'm complete, so I really don't care what you think of me. I'm a geek.
Welcome to Comics in the Cross Indie Comic Book Review. That's right, folks. We have LJ the Paladin, TolkienAsian, and Nitro on deck to review the much awaited is the word, not the word I'm looking for. We've been wanting to review this comic for a very, very long time. We have just gotten the chance to do it. And we are reviewing Saga from Image Comics, Volume 1 today. So, just a little background about the comic. It came out in 2012. It is an ongoing series, hence the name, Saga. It's written by Brian K. Vaughn, which, if you do not know who that is, he's worked for pretty much every major comic book distributor out. We're talking Vertigo, Marvel, DC, Image, all of them, basically. And then Fiona Staples, who's won tons of awards for her art. She's kind of a newer artist in the comic book community since like the mid 2010s, but she won best comic book artist, best female comic book artist of all time in 2015. So I am really excited to get into this with you guys. And Joy, I know you are a huge fan of Saga. You're the one who actually introduced it to me. So
What?
What? Prince Robot the Fourth? What are you talking about?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Why don't
I've
we
never read it in my life.
Why don't we kind of go around the quote unquote room and just talk about like first blush, what did we think of Volume 1, which is basically the first 6 issues. You want to go first, TolkienAsian?
Do I have
Lion
to?
Cat. You don't have to. I mean, yeah, go for it. You introduced the world of Saga to Comics in the Cross, so I feel like it's only right that you go first.
Did I? I know this is bad, but I don't remember when or why I picked this up at all. I have no idea. But somehow it magically appeared in my hands and I read it and I loved it. Yes. It was just a match made in heaven. I think for me, just to begin with, the reason why I love this story so much is because I just happen to have been a mother twice now, and one of our main characters, we really start the story with her giving birth her first child, Hazel. And so immediately when I was reading this, I was hooked. I was exactly like, I think that's what really connected me so deeply to this story was because she was and Marco are both just talking about family and mom and dad problems, and I just think they're hilarious because almost every parent has gone through the similar problems.
It's funny. When I was researching the comic, I read how he came up with the story. So Brian K. Vaughan has had this story since he was a kid, and he had been creating this whole world, but it had been kind of sitting on the shelf. And then his wife got pregnant, and he was like, "Ooh, I need to find a way to incorporate what we're going through into this story." So that's cool that you like kind
Oh,
of picked
that's
that out.
awesome.
Yeah,
I didn't know
yeah,
that. I didn't want to do too much. I tried to like look up a little bit of the back history, but I didn't want to do too much.
yeah,
But I mean, I feel like as a writer, you write what you are experiencing and what really is like on the forefront of your mind.
yeah.
And so that makes a lot of sense because I mean, for a lot of us, we become parents, and that can be in one way or another. Sometimes it's biological, sometimes it's not.
Mhm.
And you go through similar experiences, just you know being responsible for something that is so vulnerable and precious. And so yeah, that's a lot of the reason why I connected with this story. But I think probably besides the amazing story that it is, that just blows my mind, is the art.
Mhm.
I think just the marriage of those two just really solidified it for me
Yeah.
because both Alana and Marco are just gorgeous characters, and they're very well-rounded characters in my opinion. And I might be a little long-winded with this
It's all good.
intro, but that's just how I feel in a nutshell.
Cool.
This is me in a nutshell.
One
I had
one
to
thing I
do it.
will
I'm
say,
sorry.
I probably should have prefaced our review with this. We are going to spoil the bejesus out of this comic. So if you
Spoiler
don't like
alert.
spoilers, then go read it first. Volume 1, first 6 chapters. You can get it on Amazon super cheap, or you can
Do
get it on
yourself a
digital.
favor.
Yeah, read it first and then come back and check out our review. But cool. LJ, what about you, man?
It's M for mature on the back.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely meant for a mature audience. Like, just as a disclaimer, the
Yeah.
book contains graphic gore, graphic nudity, and like a lot of violence. Matter of fact, I think the first word in the comic is the F word. So it's definitely for mature audiences.
Yes. Yeah.
I was actually just Googling that as we started talking. I'm like, dude, this has to have been optioned at some point for for a TV series, not a movie, because that wouldn't make sense. It's too big for a movie. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Can I speculate? So my speculation is I have listened to a few interviews with Brian K. Vaughan, and he explicitly says that this is not adaptable. Like he doesn't want this to be adapted into like
Mm,
a TV series. Yeah, and so I think maybe because he went in with that mindset of this isn't going to be on the screen,
yeah.
that they could really do whatever they wanted with it.
Hmm.
And so he didn't pull any punches in regards to like the like adult themes and the
Yeah.
adult visuals and like even the politics. Like he didn't pull any punches. And so I think maybe that's why it is so intense, is
Hmm.
because maybe this is a better medium for something like that than a TV show, because for TV, like TV has gotten a lot more mature since
Hmm.
like when we were first born.
Yeah.
But like I think that maybe, yeah,
I feel like
like
Game of Thrones kind
seriously,
of broke the
yeah.
mold. Yeah.
Like I feel like maybe that like TV still, even though it's like progressed probably more than it should. I don't know. That's your own opinion. But like, or any of our opinions, like that, like the intent of when they were writing this they're maybe thinking about like the old school TV like culture.
Hmm.
And so this would be a better culture for this type of material because it's not a moving picture of
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my speculation.
That's awesome. Um, so I guess for me, like overall, I really, really like the story. I like the juxtaposition of the backdrop of this intergalactic war and the absurdity of trying to keep a little human, or not a human, but a little child alive in the midst of this. So I guess kind of to dive into the story just a little bit at a really high level. So the story kind of starts, it centers around this two main characters, Alana and Marco, who are who are different species and who are on different sides of a war that's been going on. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's actually a really good point. Marco was imprisoned at one point. This is prior, like subtext prior to the story. He was imprisoned at one point. Alana was a guard in the prison and she broke him out. In the process, they fell in love and had a baby. The baby's name is Hazel, and it's about kind of their journey, being on the run, escaping this war to raise their kid, and they're being hunted by bounty hunters, which that's a really cool aspect of the story, in my opinion. And this royal Prince Robot the Fourth, um, and like you said, LJ, I feel like it's a really cool blend of sci-fi and fantasy, which you don't really get to see a whole lot. It's either one or the other, right? It's either sci-fi or fantasy. It's really hard to find a mix to get both of those. But yeah, I do feel like when I think about all the indie comics that we've reviewed in the past, like God Country and Witches and Lock and Key, those are very distinct art styles that make those comics. Those comics have a visual stamp, a visual identity that I think you called this out, Token Asian, that kind of helps tell the story better. I think it um, it facilitates the story, and I think that in this case, it is that case. So the art from Fiona Staples, in my opinion, is deceivingly simple looking on the surface. It looks like flat colors, like really like almost sketchy lines, but that type of frenetic energy, like it's like breathes life into the actual story. It's really, really cool. Yeah. Like, I really like there's a specific, structure of the book, like, narratively, how they do it. Um, Hazel, who's their daughter, who's their newborn daughter, is actually helping narrate the first part. Actually, she helps narrate the whole volume, but she's spattered in throughout the comic, and she's narrating the journey of her mom and dad from a far distant future, and I thought that was really, really cool. What did you think about talk more about LJ about the stylistic stuff that you were talking about earlier that you said it was definitely a choice and you weren't a huge fan of it, but tell me a little bit about that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. When I first saw like Prince Robot before, I was like, what the freak? What is going on? And there are sometimes like in comics, they just do stylistic choices just to do them. Like just this is gonna be weird just to be weird. But one of the things I do appreciate about Saga and the way that Fiona Staples and Brian K. Vaughan did this is that, like for instance, Prince Robot, he has a TV for his head. It's very weird. It's really weird looking. But the way that they utilize that to show his emotional state
Hmm.
in different scenes is really, really cool. Like
Yeah.
there's an interrogation scene where he's interrogating a former inmate that was an inmate with Marco, and the dude's just, pulling his chain, like, he's not telling him anything, and you all of a sudden see a static screen go across,
Yeah.
like he's about to unload on this dude. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
It's yeah. Yeah, it's really, really cool. Yeah. Yeah. What about you,
Yeah.
Token Asian? What did you think about kind of the stylistic approach to the art or in general?
I mean, For me, I think I just loved the world, and I think I didn't even think that it was weird. And so maybe I am weird because
Well, I didn't want to say anything.
I'm like, oh crap, people think this is different and strange. But, like for me, I okay, so I feel like there's times where people try to do that and either they pull it off or they don't. And I think it's what sold it for me was just the fact that we are in a completely new built world
Yeah.
that doesn't exist anywhere else. It's not like a rewrite of something else. So for me, when I see that, I just go in with a blank slate. And I probably don't put too much forethought into it, which maybe I should. But I just felt like, for me, Lion Cat, for me, is so aesthetically pleasing
Yeah.
that for me, I was drinking it in like I was in the desert and I just needed water. Like, I felt like this was just new, it was fresh, and like Fiona Staples was solidified as my top comic book artist
Yeah.
just because her coloring is insane. It's bright. It gives life when it's supposed to give life. And I guess because I'm a woman, breasts don't bother me. I don't know.
I-
Yeah,
yeah.
it's just
Well,
it
there's
definitely
one scene in particular when
yeah,
they're on that planet. Yeah,
it
exactly.
it's crazy because like there's a creature, I forgot his name, that's further into the story. And the way that she designed him, it was literally perfection. Like, and the fact that I brought it up, I'm so sorry. But so there's just creatures in this story that, like, one thing that I've noticed about Fiona Staples is she is extremely adept to knowing animal, like, physiology. What is that word? Nitro?
Physiology.
Yes, is that what it is?
I don't
Like
know. I'm just go
physiology?
with it. Just go with it.
Anatomy, yeah, like that would probably be a better word for it,
Yeah.
but just the anatomy of a spider, the anatomy of like one of those naked cats. Um, it's just I, it just and just the fact that she didn't keep them just the size that they are naturally,
Mhm.
she enhanced their size,
Yeah.
and she really they're just completely different creatures, though they're based and rooted into like our nature and our reality, and
Speaking
so
of,
that's what makes them.
yeah. Speaking
Stop
of,
interrupting me, sir.
sorry, my bad. I
I
was
love
gonna say,
you.
speaking of character designs, I think one of my favorite designs of the volume was the stalk, that spider lady. So she's a
Yeah,
spider lady with like 4 rows of eyes, no arms, but the spider legs are her hands and arms. And just the way that it's drawn and the way that she moves in the comic is so cool. It's such a cool design.
yeah.
How's that work?
But that's like the mystery and the wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so I guess moving on to more of the narrative structure, which is kind of in your wheelhouse, Tolkien Asian. One of the things that I'm learning as I'm reading more comics, and as we're kind of working on a comic right now. Tolkien Asian has written a couple of comics. The one thing that I'm realizing is that, or the way that I look at comics is comics are breathing. When you read a comic, it breathes, it gives and it retracts, it expands and it retracts. That's very important to keep the attention of the reader, to have those quiet moments and then the build up moments and then the leaving space for just what's on the page moments. And one thing that I think Saga, I think in my opinion, this is probably the best thing about this comic is the way that it's structured, the way that the story is structured, and the way that the story matches with the visuals. Like I
Mm-hmm.
remember it was like a night or two ago. We were kind of laying in bed. I try to read comics sometimes before I go to bed, and I had this one comic, and the first page
Mm-hmm.
was just it was a wall of text,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay. I
I'm
flipped the
tired.
page, wall of text. Flip the page, wall of text, wall of text, wall of text. The art
Yeah.
was good, but I'm like, man, it's so important to just how you grasp the attention of the reader
Mm-hmm.
for comics, and I think Saga does that immensely well.
Mm-hmm.
Just the way that it lets the story breathe, even how they lay out the panels, honestly. It's not too frenetic. It is kind of, in the really chaotic scenes, but overall it's just there and it's spaced out. They leave room for, just stuff to happen. Do y'all have any thoughts on that? Just the way that the kind of the story unfolds visually?
Yeah, I think the pacing is spot on. Spot on. And I think a lot of with graphic novels, what your goal is when you're creating one is to almost make the reader feel like they're watching it on screen. Like when I'm reading it, I could literally see this if it were like on TV. It's just very fluid, seamless, and the better comic books are the ones that do that, where you almost forget that you're actually reading and you're more experiencing.
It
I think
pulls
that's
you
what
into the
you're,
world.
yeah. I think that's what you're articulating.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you said it way
and
better than I did.
no, but like you know, the best graphic novels or comic books do that, and that's why I like whenever I read one, I know how much work has gone into this because this is one of the hardest mediums to really accomplish in even creating in the first place.
Yeah.
And then there's so many hurdles even after that point. So, um, sorry, there's a gnat and I have ADHD sometimes. Not all the times, but sometimes. Um, but I I feel like because Brian K. Vaughan is such a prolific and experienced writer that and there's stories that all of us who write and create we carry with ourselves. I know James Cameron has done this with Avatar. He talks about but like we could literally be in our minds thinking about it for decades.
Yeah.
But it's until you put it down on the paper does it get out and people can read it for themselves. And
Yeah.
I went kind of digression, but um like when you said that about Brian K. Vaughan, where he has had this idea since he was like basically a young
Mhm.
kid, like it makes a lot of sense because I have a story in my head like that too.
Yeah.
Um, and so the fact that he is able to create it is a huge blessing, not only to him, but to all of us who get to experience it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I appreciate about the comic is that, like, a lot of it is absurd. Like, a lot of what happens in that comic or what you see is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. But it's it's just but it's not taken for granted is not the phrase I'm looking for, but it's just it is what it is. This is the world. Like, there's no really explaining. It just is what it is. This is the world that they live in. This is what
Hmm.
they have to do, and this is what's happening, you know? No, like, wow, that's kind of crazy, you know? It's just is what it is, and it feels like a real world, like you said, TolkienAsian. It, like, the way that the story goes about in the structure, it just slowly pulls you in. Maybe not so slowly, because at the first page or two, it's like, boom, you're in the story immediately.
Yeah.
But it's yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, you're
Yeah.
already in the middle of the story when it starts. Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And that is the genius of the writer because he expects, since this is a mature story, that he has readers who know. I mean, we've all gone through journey stories the way that this one is structured upon. So,
Mhm.
because we have that like foreknowledge, he's presupposing that he doesn't have to explain all that.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't have like we've all watched movies and read books of characters in fantasy worlds. Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, and so yeah, I think that he's just like going off of the fact that he's giving the reader the respect of knowing how much they already like is their baseline.
Mhm.
You know, so he doesn't have to take that time to
Yeah.
explain it to you because you know it.
Yeah.
And we all, I mean, it's visceral. It's in our nature. It's intuitive.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else about the comic pop out to you guys? Anything else you thought was really, really cool or you really didn't honestly like? Yeah,
Oh, it's a debate. I literally I ran to Second and Charles before I even finished like even the second chapter and I bought as many as I could.
how many do you have? How many volumes do you have,
I
TolkienAsian?
have all of them.
Yeah.
I have all of them and then I also have individual comics as well because I'm obsessed. And then I have all the Funkos, which I do. I know I'm a geek, but I don't like to spend money a lot on toys as much as my fellow friends do.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And like my office isn't decked out in a ton of toys, but I bought these. I had to. Like if there's just some that I have to buy.
Cool. How about you, TolkienAsian? Any kind of, I guess, closing thoughts? I feel like we're nearing the end.
Oh shoot. I mean, my Lanta, where do I begin? I
Or
mean,
not. I mean,
well, I think some of the things that popped out when I was like rereading it for this was you don't really notice the exposition, which I think is
that's a good point.
phenomenal.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I feel like exposition is just like it just is dolloped in there so discreetly that you really don't even realize how much you're learning and like maybe that's why like the world building is so like intense is because they're explaining a lot and you don't even realize it's happening. Like, yeah. Like the exposition, all of it was exciting and fun to read. It
Yeah.
wasn't, like you said, just text bubbles, like endless text bubbles that don't need to be here.
Well,
I,
I feel
and
like
I know that's bad. Like I love reading books, but for some reason, a text bubble will automatically make my brain shut off. I don't understand it.
so.
But
I was gonna say, TolkienAsian, you and I have had this conversation before
mhm,
regarding movies and comics and stuff like that. How they tend to tell instead of showing. Like, I think good exposition, and I'm not a writer, you are, but I think good exposition does multiple things. It
mhm,
it it propels the plot forward, but it also kind of explains what's going on. But you can
yeah.
do multiple things at one time instead of just sitting there with a back and forth talking. And I think, like to your point, I think the comic does that really well.
Yeah, and they even do that sometimes, but it's not it's natural when they do it. It
Yeah. So when he finally pulls it
yeah,
out, you're like, oh, stuff is about to go down.
like
Yeah.
it's serious. And that's the thing. Yeah, you want that to pay off for your reader. You want
Yeah.
to reward your reader because they are reading your material. You know, it's like
Yeah.
you want to give them those wins. Yeah.
Yeah. It was really cool.
Yeah, and one other thing that I enjoyed is that they made Marco like the practical parent,
Mhm.
and Alana was more of the free-spirited, I'm gonna trust this random map to get me to this rocket ship forest that I've never been to. Like, she definitely takes more leaps of faith
Mhm.
than like Marco, I feel like would naturally. And I love that they played off of that because typically with couples, like opposites attract.
Mhm.
And I feel like the characterization of that just was really, really cool because I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes the wife can always be presented as the boring practical one, always kind of like nagging. And maybe that's just, it might not be the case, but sometimes for me, maybe, yeah, it, they're kind of breaking all the stereotypes, but not like just to do it, but just because it makes it a good story. Like
Yeah.
I feel like and maybe this is me just being biased, but if I had to defend this in any form or fashion, I feel like the story is first
Mhm.
in all the decision making. And like there is a thread through the story, and I feel like that's, even though none of these creatures are human, it's like what we would consider the humanity
Yeah.
and the fact that even though they aren't human, they are all like exactly like us in our wants and our needs, and how we have our families, like the structure is the same, just with different creatures.
Yeah. I feel like a good comic is like a good band. Like the lead singer really has to be good.
Yeah.
All the other stuff enhances that. And
Hmm.
like for instance, the writing, the story is paramount in comics, right? The story is paramount. Good art makes it way better.
Hmm.
But the story is still the main thing. Yeah.
The art is going to be what makes people pick it up, though.
Exactly.
And this,
Exactly.
like, I would, well, I did, I hung this picture up in my room, but I could only find but such a large picture. And for the fact that I am a mom, it's really hard for me to read these because if I'm out at gymnastics class, can't really be busting out Saga because you never know what a kid might come and be like, oh, cartoons.
Oops.
Like, I mean, and I did have this displayed in my house, but then I realized little kids come over.
Dude, what are you
Yeah.
reading? Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I've taken a lot of my art down just because it's not just me, myself, and I, Nitro
Yeah.
anymore.
All right. So, closing thoughts on the comic. Recommend, yay, nay, anything else pop in your brain that you want to talk through on the comic?
Well, I guess you would know my answer.
You hate it. Would not
I
recommend.
I would recommend to anyone who I feel like wouldn't be perturbed of the content involved. I
Yeah.
would definitely give a lot of trigger warnings,
Yeah.
but other than that, I feel like it's a really great story. And it is kind of a bummer for some people they wouldn't be able to read it because of that.
Mhm.
But it's gonna be for a certain audience. It's not gonna be for the mass general
Yeah.
audience. And that might be another reason why they don't want to adapt it. It's
Yeah.
not for that, as big of an audience.
Yeah. What about you, LJ? Recommend? Yay, nay? Yeah. One of the reasons that we kind of started the journey on the indie comic, kind of train is that, the big two and now the big three kind of Image has started to become a big, a big one like Marvel and DC. There's a lot of, and Image not so much for this, but there's just a lot of, it's just a lot of the same stories. It's a lot of,
Mhm.
it's a lot of the same structure. It's a lot of the same. Oh, this person died and they're coming back, and there's no detachment or variance from that. And the reason I like indie comics so much is that they're not tied to a preconceived narrative structure like
Right.
a Marvel or superhero comic even. A lot of the stuff, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. And a lot of the stuff that we read is not even, or most if not all the indie stuff that we read is not even superhero comics. Like this one is not a superhero comic. It's just like
Yeah.
almost like a political thriller, war action comic. It's a really mixed bag. Yeah, yeah. I love the comic. I've read it twice because I forgot that I read the first time, and when we read it for this, I was like, I apparently I read the whole thing, so I read it twice. I loved it. Like we've said this whole time, it is definitely meant for mature audiences. There's a lot of mature content, a lot of trigger warning material. So just go into that if you're okay with some of that or all of it, go into that, with that in mind.
Oop.
With yeah, open mind. The story is amazing. Brian K. Vaughan knocks it out of the park, and Fiona Staples' art is next level. And I don't know if you caught this, LJ. What I was saying earlier. I think good comics have distinct styles. Like again, I think of Lock and Key. I think of Witches. I think of God Country. Even that is a way out there style. God Country is, but yeah,
Oh, it's so
that
good.
it that becomes that comic. Like Fiona Staples' art becomes Saga. That is Saga, and it's a really cool, distinctive, set apart from like anything that's out there. It's almost like a good song that you hear that doesn't sound like anything. That's what I kind of come to this with. So I
Yeah.
really liked it. I would definitely recommend it to anybody who loves a good story and who's not easily offended. Cool. Anything else? All right, cool. Well, thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate you hanging with us as we reviewed Saga Volume 1 from Image Comics, written by Brian K. Vaughan and illustrated by Fiona Staples. We are Comics in the Cross, and we stream every week. We do D&D, really geeky game stuff, and obviously comic reviews and board game reviews. Just anything geek, we're involved. We have our hands in it. Our digits are in it. But as always, our call sign as we sign off. Remember, it is a great week to be a geek. We love you all. Thank you. Have a good one.
Man, again, that discussion was super, super good. We found a real good balance in between kind of the areas that we all came from as far as like comic book fans. So for me, I'm a very casual comic book reader. I still read a lot of Marvel and DC, and I'm very new to the indie comic book world. I shared my thoughts about how like the indie comic book club and hearing Cross and Nitro talk about these comics have really expanded my knowledge and just the way they talk about comics in general. I've considered myself to have a slightly above average knowledge about comics in the first place because in my family I'm the type of person that's like somebody watches a Marvel movie and they come to me for answers or questions and like, oh hey, is this in the comic or what happens here? And so I'm that guy in my family, but this indie realm is something totally new to me. And for Saga, I really love the concept of it, and I love the fantasy and sci-fi mix of everything. Um, it does have this edge to it and this stylistic choice that like I'm personally not the biggest fan of. Like, it's a lot of the nudity and kind of the adult stuff that gets shown in some of the panels, and that's just me personally. Like, I don't think it's a thing they did for shock value necessarily. It was a very stylistic choice, and it's like, okay, that's not necessarily for me, and like, if it doesn't bother you, then that's totally awesome, which we discussed. And I really love that, like, this style versus something like, so I'm a Hellboy fan, and so I'm a fan of Mike Mignola and that art, and so it's like Joy's a super huge fan of Saga, if you didn't already pick that up by watching this. So it's like, it's just not for me personally. It's not something I'm a huge fan of. But I love the characters. Isabel in particular is one of my favorites. If you do decide to read this, Isabel is a ghost who becomes a babysitter basically for this couple during this journey. And I really loved that even though I am not a parent, or I've never been a parent, I still feel like these characters, Marco and Alana, are like a totally normal couple, like in the real world, in today's society, just trying to figure things out. Because as kids, we look at our parents like they're superheroes, like that they know everything and that they know how to deal with anything. But it's like, no, like, parents are really just trying to figure it out. And that they really did a fantastic job, the writer, and to convey that. And we talked a lot about how there's a lot of humanity in this book, even though there's characters of different races across this like galaxy. And I really loved, we talked about the narrative and how you didn't have to basically do an origin story or introduce these characters like from the beginning of this story. It feels like we're already maybe a few chapters in, maybe a chapter or two in, at this point, when we meet the characters. And so I really loved that, and the kind of hints and the lead up to things. Like, a big thing for me was Marco's sword. Like, they introduced it to you, and you knew about it, but then I think it was exposition was the word that we used. The exposition was awesome because there's this narrative throughout. And for me, the sword was something that I didn't expect to pay off so soon in the way it did, and it was super cool. I love the whole rocket ship forest setting, because on the map, she's like, "Oh, we're going to this rocket ship forest," and I'm thinking like a junkyard or something, or this place that's got these old rocket ships or something. But they were like literally trees of rocket ships, and I'm just like, that is so cool. Like, I love the setting. And I don't know if it's still a debate as when we first recorded this, but I was debating on whether I really wanted to keep reading. And the more I think about it, I think I might. I think I might pick up the next volume. But anyway, I'm gonna stop there before I keep blabbering on. Thank you all so much, and I pray that we don't have any technical issues in the future. And see you for the next one. Peace out, and it's a good week to be a geek.